I never meant to end up shirtless in the back of a stranger's car at 3 a.m., but if we're being honest, most of my worst and best decisions started with a screw it kind of attitude. It was late July, the kind of hot, sticky summer night where even the pavement seemed to sweat. I was supposed to be home, curled up in bed with the AC humming and some dumb Netflix show in the background. But instead I let my friend Jordan drag me out to a house party 2 neighborhoods over. Fresh air and fresh men, he said. I didn't argue, even though I was pretty sure neither of those existed in our town. I ended up in a too-warm kitchen with a flat ginger ale and a red Solo cup when I noticed him. He was standing outside on the back porch, leaning against the railing like he owned it. Gray t-shirt, a cigarette tucked behind one ear, and a half smile that looked dangerous in the best way. He wasn't loud or trying to be the center of attention, just confident in that quiet, unsettling way that made people look twice. I didn't mean to stare, but then he looked up and caught me doing it. I looked away, heart pounding, but when I glanced back, he was still looking, and then he smiled, like he knew something I didn't. Jordan elbowed me. "Oh no," he said with a grin. "Don't tell me you've got your eye on that guy." "What guy?" "Back porch. Lumberjack energy. He's not your type, he's everybody's type." I laughed, tried to brush it off. But 10 minutes later, I was out there too, pretending to look for Jordan while secretly hoping I'd bump into him again. And I did. He offered me a light, even though I don't smoke. I said yes anyway. His name was Eli. He was in town for the weekend, staying with a cousin after a messy breakup. I told him I was a freelance designer, broke, and trying to get my shit together. We sat on the porch steps, talking about nothing and everything, the party fading behind us. At one point, our arms brushed. Neither of us moved, and then he said, "I don't really want to go back to my cousin's place." I just looked at him. He added, "Not trying to be weird, I just like this." I said, "Yeah, me too." So that's how I ended up in the passenger seat of his borrowed Jeep, shirtless, the windows rolled down, the night air thick and buzzing with something I didn't quite understand. He drove us up to this overlook, just trees, stars, and the faint glow of town in the distance. We sat there in silence for a bit. Then he turned toward me and leaned in. His kiss didn't feel rushed. It was slow, careful, like he wasn't sure if I'd pull away. I didn't. I leaned in, met him halfway. His lips were soft but steady, and the moment our mouths touched, something inside me just let go. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding myself together until that moment. The stress of the last few months, the second guessing, the loneliness, it all melted into the warmth of his touch. One of his hands found the side of my neck, his thumb grazing my jaw like he was tracing something important. I wasn't used to being touched like that. Not like I mattered. When we finally pulled apart, he didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just sat there for a few seconds, the silence not awkward, but full. Charged. Then Eli leaned back in his seat, exhaling like he hadn't breathed in days. "Sorry," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "That was probably stupid." "Don't apologize," I said, surprising even myself. He glanced over at me, his brows lifting slightly. "I wanted it too." That made him smile. Just a little. "Good," he said, because I wasn't sure if I just read the whole thing wrong. "No, you didn't." We sat like that for a while, our knees brushing in the tight space between the seats. The car's engine was off, windows down, the air filled with night sounds, distant crickets, a passing car somewhere down the road, the occasional breeze that carried the smell of pine and asphalt. "You ever do something like this before?" he asked eventually. "You mean get half naked in a stranger's car at 3 a.m.? He laughed, and it was such a nice sound. Honest. "I meant a guy." "Yeah," I said quietly. "You?" He paused, eyes flicking away for a second. "Once. A long time ago. Didn't end well." I didn't press. The way he said it told me not to. We were quiet again, but this time it felt more like a question waiting to be asked. Then he shifted in his seat, turned toward me fully, his expression open and vulnerable. "You want to get out for a minute?" "Yeah," I said, not really knowing what I was agreeing to. We stepped out of the Jeep. The overlook was just a patch of gravel off a service road, barely lit by a single yellowing street lamp. Beyond the edge of the barrier was a steep drop into dark trees. We leaned against the hood, side by side, not touching this time, just watching the sky. "I used to come up here a lot," he said, "when I was younger, before I figured myself out." I glanced at him, curious. "Figured out what?" He looked over at me, eyes soft. "That it wasn't going away." "What wasn't?" He smiled, almost shy. "The part of me that looks at guys the way I looked at you tonight." That stopped me. Not because it was shocking, but because he said it like it was something he hadn't admitted out loud before. "Well," I said, my voice quieter now, "I guess I'm glad you looked." He laughed again, and this time, he reached for my hand. No hesitation, just fingers slipping between mine, grounding and steady. We stood there for a while, hand in hand, the night wrapping around us like a secret. His thumb moved in small circles over mine, almost absent-mindedly, like he was calming himself. Or maybe me. Either way, I didn't want him to stop. It had been a long time since someone touched me like that. "I don't really do this kind of thing," he said after a while, voice low. "The hookups, the spontaneous stuff." "You mean kissing a stranger at a party and then driving to the woods?" He gave a sheepish laugh. "Exactly." I squeezed his hand gently. "Same. I usually overthink everything until the moment's gone." Eli looked over at me then, and the way he did it made my chest feel weirdly tight. Like he was seeing me in a way most people didn't bother to. "But you didn't tonight," he said. "No, I didn't." He let go of my hand, not harshly, just enough to shift closer. His arm brushed against mine, our bodies barely touching now as we leaned against the warm hood of his car. He didn't speak again for a while, just stared out at the view. Nothing really spectacular, just tree silhouettes and distant highway lights, but it felt like he was trying to settle into the quiet. "I think I've been lonely," he said suddenly. "More than I like to admit." His words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." There was something in the way he said it, matter of fact, but with a thread of shame woven in, that made me want to reach out and pull him into a hug. Instead, I just bumped my shoulder gently into his. "For what it's worth," I said, "you don't seem broken or weird, you seem normal." Eli snorted. Dangerous word. Normal. Fine, you seem real. He looked at me again. This time he didn't say anything. He just stared, long enough for me to wonder if I'd said too much. Then he leaned in again. This kiss was different, less cautious. His lips were firmer, more certain. One of his hands came up to rest at the back of my neck, fingers curling slightly in my hair. I responded without thinking, like my body already knew what to do, like I'd been waiting for this longer than I realized. When we pulled apart, he kept his forehead pressed against mine. "I don't know what this is," he whispered. "Me neither," I whispered back. "But I don't want it to be over yet." That made me smile. "Then don't let it be." We ended up crawling into the back seat of the Jeep. Not for anything wild, just to be closer, to talk, to maybe fall asleep tangled up like a couple of dumb teenagers. The leather was warm from the sun, and he pulled a blanket out from under the seat. I kicked off my shoes, curled against the window, and let him pull me into his chest. "You sure you're okay with this?" he asked. I nodded, already halfway gone. "Yeah," I murmured. "You?" He didn't answer right away, just kissed the top of my head. "I am now." I woke up to sunlight, filtering through the car windows, and the sound of birds somewhere off in the trees. For a moment, I didn't move, just lay there, blinking against the light, my cheek pressed to Eli's chest. He was still asleep, breathing slow and steady, one arm draped over my waist like it had always been there. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The back seat, his Jeep, the overlook, and him. It hit me all at once. Last night actually happened. The kiss. The quiet confessions. Falling asleep in each other's arms like we'd done it 100 times before. I shifted a little to get more comfortable, and Eli stirred beneath me. Morning, he said, voice gravelly. Morning. He blinked down at me, a lazy smile spreading across his face. Still here, huh? Unless you kicked me out while I was sleeping. He chuckled. I thought about it. But you looked too peaceful. There was a beat of silence between us, soft and sweet. Then he added, more seriously, I meant what I said last night. I looked up at him. I don't want this to be over. Me neither. We didn't really talk about what that meant, not then. We just got up slowly, stretched out the creases in our clothes, and drove back into town. It was quiet, but not awkward. Just calm. Back at my place, he parked in front of the building and turned off the engine. Neither of us moved to get out. So, he said, resting his hand on the gear shift. What now? I hesitated, unsure. I mean, you're only in town for the weekend, right? He looked out the windshield, then back at me. Yeah, but I could extend my visit. For me? For us, if you want that. I didn't answer right away. I just studied his face. He looked nervous. Not the charming, flirty guy from the party. Just a guy who was genuinely scared he might have misread everything. I reached over, placing my hand on his. I want that. His relief was obvious. He nodded once, then leaned across the console and kissed me again. Quick, soft, like a promise. You're dangerous, I muttered as we pulled apart. He smirked. You just figuring that out? That weekend turned into a week. Then 2. He crashed at his cousin's place, but spent most nights with me. We'd cook late-night dinners, fall asleep on the couch watching dumb movies, and slowly started stitching our lives together one piece at a time. We didn't put a label on anything right away. It was just easy, natural, real. Eli told me things he hadn't told anyone about his last relationship, his fears, his complicated family. I told him about the stuff I usually kept to myself, too. And the more we talked, the more I realized this wasn't just a fling. One night, a couple weeks in, we were lying in bed, legs tangled under the sheets. And I asked him, what happens when you leave? He didn't answer at first, just looked up at the ceiling. I don't want to leave, he finally said. Then don't. I'm serious. So am I. He turned his head to face me. You're saying? I'm saying if this feels right to you the way it feels right to me, we can figure it out wherever it leads. Eli smiled, but it was different this time. Deeper, like he was finally letting himself believe in something good. I think I already knew that, he said. From the second you said yes to a light you didn't need. Things changed after that conversation, but in the best way. It wasn't like we slapped labels on what we were doing. There were no dramatic declarations or social media updates. It was subtle, natural, but the shift was there. He stopped calling it crashing. He'd just text, coming over? And sometimes I'd beat him home. We started grocery shopping together. He stocked his favorite protein bars in my pantry, and I stopped pretending I didn't like his weird almond milk. His toothbrush showed up next to mine one morning. I didn't ask questions. I just moved it into the cup beside mine like it belonged there. And honestly, it did. We had our first argument about laundry of all things. He shrunk one of my sweaters, my favorite one. At first, I was genuinely annoyed. He apologized, and I wanted to stay mad, but then he offered to wear the shrunken thing as penance, and he looked so ridiculous in it that I laughed until I couldn't breathe. That night, as we lay in bed, he looked over at me with that quiet intensity I was still getting used to. I've never done this before, he said. Like the domestic stuff. Living with someone? Caring about someone. I turned toward him, the glow from the streetlights outside catching on his cheek. "It shows," I teased gently. He chuckled, but his fingers reached for mine under the blanket, threading them together. "You make it easy, though." We were quiet for a bit after that. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind where your skin feels warm just because they're near. Weeks passed like that, slow, steady, full of small moments that felt bigger than they had any right to. I watched Eli settle into himself. He started talking more about staying longer, maybe taking a break from his old job, looking for something new, something here. Then one night, I came home from a meeting to find him pacing my apartment, phone in hand. His hair was messy from his hands running through it, and the second he saw me, he hung up. "What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated, then finally said it. "My ex is here." "In town." That knocked the wind out of me for a second. "What?" "She called, said she was visiting family and wanted to talk." "Talk about what?" "I don't know. Closure, I guess." I tried to stay calm. I really did. But the knot in my stomach tightened. "Do you want to see her?" He came toward me, shaking his head. "No, I don't. But I also don't want to lie to you. She's part of my past, yeah. But I'm not going back to that. I'm here, with you." His voice was steady, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. Not because he'd done anything wrong, just because he hated bringing anything messy into this thing we were building. I nodded slowly. "Okay, you believe me?" "Yeah, I do." He pulled me into a hug, holding me close like he didn't want to let go. "You're not just a rebound," he whispered. "I hope you know that." I held onto him just as tightly. I didn't until now. The next day, I found Eli on the couch with his laptop open, researching jobs in the area. Architecture firms, design studios, even city planning departments. He had a pen tucked behind his ear and a determined look on his face. "What's this?" I asked, leaning over the back of the couch. "Plan B," he said without looking up. "Plan B?" If I'm staying here, I need to start thinking long term, not just about us, but my future, what I want, where I want to be. I smiled, walking around to sit beside him. "And where is that?" He looked at me for the first time all morning, his expression soft. "Right here." It was the first time he'd said it that plainly. He closed the laptop and turned toward me, resting one arm along the back of the couch. "You're the first person in a long time who makes me feel like I can just be. No pretending, no editing myself down to what someone else expects. Just me." I didn't know what to say at first, so I didn't. I just leaned in and kissed him. And when we pulled apart, he whispered, "I'm all in." A week later, he had 2 interviews lined up. Nothing fancy, nothing guaranteed. But it was movement, a decision, something he hadn't let himself want in years. We spent that weekend celebrating the only way we knew how, quietly, with takeout and bad TV and limbs tangled under the blanket on the couch. "You think we're moving too fast?" he asked, voice muffled against my shoulder. I thought about it for a second. "Probably." "You scared?" "Terrified," I said, but in a good way. "Same." The following Monday, I walked him to his first interview. Not like into the office or anything. We're not that codependent, but I waited with him outside the building. He was dressed in his usual mix of charm and chaos. Pressed slacks, clean white shirt, but still that same old battered watch he refused to replace. "You've got this," I said. He nodded, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. "And if I don't?" "There's another one tomorrow, and the day after. You're not alone." His eyes flicked to mine, something intense behind them. "You really mean that?" "Yeah, I do." He reached out and touched the edge of my jaw. "Don't disappear on me, okay?" "I'm not going anywhere." That night, we walked down to the pier, something he said he used to do when he needed to clear his head. The water was black and glassy, only the moonlight breaking its surface. "I didn't get the job," he said softly. I stopped walking, but they said they were impressed. "They're keeping my info on file." I nodded. "Then it's not a no, it's a not yet." He looked at me like I'd just solved some great mystery. God, how do you do that? Do what? Make things not feel like the end of the world. I shrugged. I have been through enough to know when it's just the beginning. The next job interview went better. They didn't just keep him on file, they called him back 2 days later with an offer. It wasn't his dream job, but it was solid. Good pay, flexible hours, and most importantly, it was local. I came home to find him pacing the kitchen, phone still in hand, a grin stretched across his face like he didn't quite know what to do with it. "They want me," he said. "They actually want me." "Of course they do," I said, wrapping my arms around him. "You're a freaking catch," he laughed into my shoulder. "You're biased." "Maybe." Still true. We ordered pizza to celebrate, opened a cheap bottle of wine we'd been saving for no real reason, and fell asleep on the couch halfway through some old movie we both pretended to like. A week later, he moved in. Not in a dramatic, boxes piled high and keys exchanged kind of way. It was quieter, a toothbrush left behind on purpose. Then his hoodie hanging on the back of my chair, his laptop on the dining table. Until one day I looked around and realized half the apartment was his now. He didn't say it. Neither did I. We didn't have to. It just felt right. One night, about a month after all of it began, I found him sitting on the balcony, knees drawn up, a blanket draped around his shoulders. The sky was clear, stars scattered like glitter, and he looked peaceful. But his eyes were distant. "You okay?" I asked, stepping outside. "Yeah. Just thinking." I sat beside him, pulling the blanket to cover both of us. "You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" "Sometimes," I admitted, but only in a thank God we did kind of way. He nodded. "I almost didn't go to that party. Almost just stayed in, wallowed a bit." "Glad you didn't." He looked at me, eyes a little shinier than usual. "Me too," and then he said it. "I think I'm falling for you." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. He didn't say it like it was some huge confession. Just a truth, simple, honest. I didn't answer right away. I reached for his hand under the blanket, lacing our fingers together. "I think I already did." We sat like that for a long time, just breathing, listening to the night, letting those words settle in our bones. Later, curled up in bed, I asked, "What now?" He looked over at me, sleepy but smiling. "Now, we just keep showing up for each other. And after that, whatever comes next." The months that followed weren't perfect. Real life still showed up, messy and inconvenient, just like always. We had arguments, some stupid, like over who forgot to buy toilet paper, and some real, like when his mom called unexpectedly and he avoided introducing me. That one stung. But we talked. We worked through it. He didn't shut down or run. He stayed. That meant more than I could explain. He met my friends. They loved him instantly. Of course they did. He was warm, in the way that made people feel like they'd known him forever. He teased Jordan mercilessly, and Jordan gave it right back, probably relieved to see me happy after a string of false starts. Eli started building a life here. He found a rhythm, something stable, and his own. He came home tired but content, telling me stories about weird office politics and ridiculous blueprints. I'd listen while cooking, or half asleep on the couch, or while brushing my teeth. And every time I thought, this is what I wanted. Not just someone to love, someone to live with, to grow with. One night, we went back to that overlook, just for the hell of it. A quiet drive, windows down, music low. It looked the same. Just a patch of road, a view barely visible in the dark. But it felt different now. It wasn't the edge of something anymore. It was the middle, a checkpoint, a place that had once felt like the beginning of something unknown, and now felt like memory. He pulled the Jeep over, turned off the engine, and we sat in silence for a bit. "Still feels like magic," he said. "Yeah, but now it's ours." He looked over at me, his face soft in the dim dashboard glow. That night scared the hell out of me. "Because you kissed a guy?" He smirked. "No, because I wanted more. And I didn't think I'd get it." "You did." He reached over, ran his hand along the side of my face. "Yeah, I did." The thing about love, real love, is that it doesn't announce itself with fireworks or some grand gesture. It sneaks in. It builds. It shows up every day, even when you don't feel like being seen. He moved in officially 3 weeks after that. We signed a lease together. We painted the walls. We adopted a cat named Sunday, who hates everyone but him. We fought. We made up. We kept showing up. One morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter in his handwriting. It just said, "Still here." I smiled for hours after that. Still here. Still us. And maybe that's all love ever really is. Two people who choose each other again and again in every small and ordinary moment.